Oh my God.
No.
Yeah, I mean, how right, I saw that movie. Oh, right. Social studies. So you're like Richard Owens? Yes. Richard Owens or Steve Alter? Yeah. Steve Alter is okay. Very across Yep. You guys all ready?
So stand up and everybody stand up to the pledge of allegiance.
With allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll bring the meeting for City and Council, meeting for February 11th, 2020. All councilmen are here except for Nielsen, which I understand is medical. Mayor's here, Attorney Riggs, Beth, Mark, the city administrator, and the city engineer are all present, along with Derek. I'll do it that way. So, is there any citizens' comments? Nobody? Okay, we'll cross that off. And we'll go to adopt the agenda. Is there anything on there that needs to be changed?
3 items to add to the agenda. First item will be B under new business, and that would be, you have a handout. There's, I believe, 3 interfund transfers that need to be approved by the council. That'd be B under new business. Then C under new business would be Gunderson House furnace. And then the third item is to the consent agenda would be the approved hiring or appointment of 2 part-time employees at the liquor store. Amy Eric and Ryan Overby.
Okay, you got all that information, okay.
I will move approval of the amended agenda with those 3 items added.
Okay, second? Second. Okay, it's been, motion's been made and second to adopt the agenda with the changes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, ayes pass. Okay. Do then the consent agenda and approval of minutes and appointments and the financial, we can do all at one time.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion been made and second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes pass. Okay. Guess we can get right on into it then. Presentations, public hearings, and recognitions of proclamations. Number A on it is, which is a nice one to see, it is the oath of office of Kenyon police officers, Randy Allen and Mitchell Taylor. And Chief Lee, I believe you're gonna
Yeah, I'll
do
do
the
those
swearing in.
Right here.
They might speak up loud now.
I talk loud.
Okay.
All right, raise your right hand, read after me, ready? I,
I,
state your name,
Randy Allen,
do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, and to discharge faithfully the duties of police officer for the police department, city of Kenyon, Minnesota, to the best of my knowledge and ability.
do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, and to discharge faithfully the duties of police officer for the police department of the city of Kenyon, Minnesota, to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Congratulations. Thanks, Steve. Same drill, ready? Put your hand, I'll read it, you say it after me. I, say your name.
I, Mitch Taylor,
Do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, to discharge faithfully the duties of police officer for the police department of the city of Kenyon, Minnesota, to the best of my knowledge and ability.
do solemnly swear to support the Constitution of the United States and of this state, and to discharge faithfully the duties of police officer for the police department of the city of Kenyon, Minnesota, to the best of my knowledge and ability.
Congratulations.
Well, that one went quickly. Next one will be for a school bus driver appreciation day. Is there anybody here from there? Okay. Have you, one of you, Councilman, prefer to read it to them, what it states, and we can at least acknowledge? Will you state your name?
My name is David Houster.
Okay, David.
Whereas in darkness and daylight, on dirt roads to multi-lane highways, from the warm spring to the frigid winter, Minnesota school bus drivers safely transport more than 760,000 students to and from school each day. And whereas school bus drivers bookend the student's school day, serving as a mentor and having a positive influence on a student's educational experience. And whereas students are approximately 70 times more likely to get to school safely if they take the school bus instead of traveling by car. And whereas the school bus industry is the largest form of mass transit in Minnesota and is reducing its environmental impact by using alternative fuels and retrofitting diesel engines. And whereas it is estimated that the use of school buses saves the United States approximately 2.6 billion gallons of fuel each year. And whereas nearly every school district in the state is facing a bus driver shortage and is seeking professionals who are driven to serve in these fulfilling, flexible jobs. And whereas the city of Kenyon, Minnesota appreciates school bus drivers and recognizes the invaluable contributions they make to public education and student safety. Today, we recognize these worthy professionals.
Okay. Therefore, I, Doug Henke, Mayor, do hereby proclaim Wednesday, February the 26th, 2020 as a School Bus Driver Appreciation Day. So we do have, I don't know, this is all we've got, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
We appreciate the recognition on behalf of the Delta Bus Group.
I at least signed it so I can have this much of it.
You don't all have to leave.
Hey, the cake, I see the cake going. Boo. You know what we didn't do is we needed to make an emotion, we still can yet, from the
Well,
school bus
I
driver.
don't think you need to, for proclamation, I think
You
the mayor
don't,
just.
you don't need to, you can if you want to, but no, you need to cut it.
I think you got consensus.
Yeah.
I mean, you put it on there, but I don't think.
We're all for it.
Okay, well, let's just keep moving along here then. Engineering.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Council. We've got a few items to cover tonight. We'll take them one at a time. The information and materials are in your packet. We'll have some other handouts here to pass out as we go on a couple of the items. First item is the wastewater permit. Now, this is the MPCA permit. We've talked about this one before. This is because you own and operate your own wastewater collection and treatment system. You're required to hold a permit from the state pollution control agency, and that permit is renewed every 5 years. Current permit is scheduled to expire on February 29th, so the new permit needs to be in place by the end of February. All the paperwork has been submitted to PCA. They're just in the process of working through the paperwork, so we don't anticipate, and we haven't heard of any complications, so we anticipate that the permit is going to be processed just fine. You may recall one of the items we have with this cycle is we had to guarantee we could, or show that we could consistently meet an effluent level of 10 nanograms per liter of mercury in the wastewater stream leaving the plant. And you know, we've done some work on that, and the primary project was the lining project we did this year on 2nd Street where the old historic dentist's office had been. And based on that, the tests we've gotten taken since that project has been done, we're showing levels of about 6 and 7, so well under the limit. So we're going to be providing those results to the MPCA and a letter stating that, you know, it appears that with the current configuration and current treatment process, we're able to show that we can consistently meet, and then we'll provide more data to them as we get tests. I think the last test was just taken here and submitted to the lab the last day or two.
So we're waiting results.
Yeah. So, but everything's looking positive, and Derek, I don't know if there's anything else, but
No, this is
No
just
action
the last,
needed.
this is the last step, that's part of the existing permit, is to provide notification that everything's operating from the limits of the permit, so, we'll submit that letter, and then, the new draft permit should be available, I would think sometime soon, but that will come from MPCA, it's in their hands.
it is kind of interesting when we look at the mercury minimization plan that we're required to provide to PCA to document, you know, the history of the mercury levels in the city and to document what we're doing to address that. And we look at our testing results, you know, back in, of course, now I lost my page. Back in 2017, the levels were up about 40 nanograms per liter. And then we had gone through and done a bunch of testing around town and identified the hotspot. If you remember, we did some strategic jetting of specific evidence to try and break loose some of those old deposits and get it to flush through the system. And in 2018, the numbers dropped quite a bit. but they were still above that limit of 10, which is why then we had to go after this project to line that block that we had identified as the hot spot with the old dentist office. And now doing that, that's dropped, the December reading was 6.6, the January reading was 4.5. So, looks like, the steps we've taken to address the problems.
Very good.
So, no actions needed on that, just more for an update of where we are in the process. Any questions on wastewater permit? Okay, then we'll move on to the Kenyon Business Park. Derek's got a presentation that he's going to do, and he's got handouts that he can pass out.
And this is already in your guys' packets.
Yep, so we've got some that the audience can have as well. While he's doing that, I'll just give a little background. So as you know, we've been working for the past several months, or actually the past few years with the city on developing a business park, an industrial business park, with a 31-acre parcel that the city purchased on the east side of the city. And for the last few months, we've been working on the platting documents, which consists of a preliminary plat and a final plat, which lay out the legal boundaries of the property and how we're going to legally subdivide the one parcel into the lots and the road right-of-ways that we need and those types of things. Also with the platting documents, we're required to put together the utility plan, the grading plan, stormwater management plan, and all of those things in accordance with the city code and state regulations. Because it is the city developing the property, we're able to compress the timeline a little bit and handle both the preliminary plat and the final plat at the same time. But we still have to go through all the same processes to develop the property. And one of those is a public hearing, hold a formal public hearing when the materials are ready for review. And so last month, on January 21st, we did hold a formal public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission. They're the body that holds that public hearing. And we did receive input from the public. At the end of that public hearing, the Planning Commission debated the issue and ultimately voted to pass or forward the plats on to the council with a recommendation of approval. So tonight, we've got a couple of items. The first action that we'll be seeking after the presentation is consideration of whether or not you want to formally approve the plats and authorize them for final signature and recording with the county. And then after that, we'll talk about a feasibility report for the first stage of the actual construction project. So, any questions at this point? Okay, other than that, then I'll let Derek proceed with the presentation on the plat.
So one thing to keep in mind tonight, the council is looking at approving the plat itself and not the actual final engineering and construction plans that will come in a month or so. And so, or whenever that, is very shortly. And that's when this discussion on drainage comes up. That's really when that would be approved or that plan. So this is just the plat or the layout of the development. It's not the final engineering plans, but just keep that in mind when the discussion comes up.
Yeah, the plat identifies the legal subdivision you're going to do with the property. And obviously a plat can get approved and nothing could ever happen on the property, right? That's happened in the past where a party will plat a piece of land and never build on it. So it is a step-by-step process. The step tonight is to approve the plat, which would perform the legal subdivision of the property and record it with the county.
All right, go from there. So the presentation that I have for everyone here tonight is very similar to the presentation that was given on January 21st during the Planning Commission meeting. Basically what we're doing tonight is kind of an overview of the proposed design, how we plan to subdivide that property, and then some of the design details associated with the sanitary sewer water main extensions needed to bring those utilities to the site, and also some drainage discussion. We'll wrap up the discussion with a summary of the schedule and next steps. So just to provide a summary of the layout that was selected by the EDA for moving forward with this platting process that we're here to talk about today. What's provided up on the screen is the layout that was recommended as the preferred design and preferred layout by the ADA and was also discussed with City Council previously for moving forward with this planning process. So just to summarize, the area that's in red up on the screen are the 4 lots that would be subdivided and buildable once the improvements are implemented and the plat is finalized or approved. Those 4 lots are anywhere from 2.5 to just over 3 acres in size. As part of the improvements that we're planning on executing with the project, there's about 770 feet of new street. It's right in this area here, which would be called Angle Drive, proposed as part of that project. That street will be 40 feet wide. We'll have curb and gutter, so it will be a traditional urban section road like you would see in most areas of town. There is a right turn lane along County Road 12, which is on the south side of the property, the bottom of the page. As I mentioned earlier, there will be city utility services extended up to the site and services extended up to these new properties. So that'll include water main and sanitary sewer service. We'll get into more details on the stormwater management in just a bit here, but the site does also include the construction of a new storm sewer collection system, which will take water from the roads and from these lots. That will convey water to a proposed stormwater retention pond, which is proposed to be constructed in the southwest corner of the property. Overall project cost for this project is just over $2.2 million. We submitted a grant application to DEED, or the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, through one of their programs known as the Business Development Public Infrastructure Program. So that was last year. In July of 2019, that grant was awarded, or at least the funds were allocated for this project. Those grant funds totaled just over $670,000, and that is the reimbursement grant. So the remaining $1.5 million would be 100% city funded in this particular case.
Question. What's that circle? Right above right there?
This is proposed for a gravel turnaround. So right now, this is just going to be a dead-end street. So one of the things we typically do with these areas, eventually this would be built out during later phases of development, but we construct a gravel turnaround to allow trucks to turn around there.
Thank you.
Thanks for pointing that out. So I'll hit on a couple of the design considerations, first of which is sanitary sewer. So if you remember back in early 2019, we put together sanitary sewer and water main analysis to look at the extensions of both of those utilities up to the project site, basically to understand what it was that we needed to do to bring those utilities onto the EDA property for future development. So I'll just kind of walk through this. First with sanitary sewer. Down at the bottom of the screen, this line that's indicated in yellow was the first route for sanitary sewer that we had identified as a potentially feasible route. Basically what it would involve was any of the sanitary sewer within the site would be routed out to County Road 12, within County Road 12, and connect up to an existing sanitary sewer main, kind of over on the east end of town where my cursor is right now. So when we had looked at this alternative, there was a number of issues with that route. I'll just kind of touch on two of them. The first of which is, in order to extend sanitary sewer within County Road 12, due to the grade that we need to construct this pipe, underground or trenchless construction methods would not be available, meaning that we would need to completely dig up the entire pavement surface of County Road 12 for, I think it was around 1,000 feet to install this new pipe in the center line of the road. So in order to do that, that adds a significant amount of cost that wouldn't otherwise need to be part of the project if you were able to construct that line outside of the road. So that was issue number one, added cost from the pavement replacement. Issue number two, and probably even one of the bigger issues associated with this, is this sanitary sewer main that's located within County Road 12 right now, right in this location, flows towards a sanitary sewer main that was constructed many, many years ago and is currently routed adjacent to and nearby Pearl Creek before it discharges to the wastewater plant, and the wastewater is allowed to be treated. There are a number of questions associated with this line. There's some areas where we don't know the exact location of it.
We found it all.
You found it all now, okay. There have been areas of it that we have been able to televise and actually get a camera down in the pipe to see what the condition of the pipe is, but overall, there are segments of that that have not been televised, and we don't know the existing structural condition. Of the segments that have been televised, it's older clay pipe, and realistically, that should be on some type of priority list for future replacement someday. So due to some of those concerns with the condition of that existing pipe routed through, or routed around Pearl Creek, we didn't feel that a large amount of new sanitary sewer or new wastewater from the proposed development would be appropriate to send down that older line. So instead, what we had looked at was this northern route, which is shown in red. This extends up through a couple of private properties up to Highway 60 and then connects up to an existing newer main on the south side of Highway 60 near the county shop building. So a couple of advantages associated with this alternative and the reason why it was selected. Overall, even though this line is about 3 times as long as this yellow line, the south route, the cost for each of those alternatives is about the same. Only when we extend sanitary up to the north through these private properties, those owners, when they're looking to develop at some point in the future, can take advantage of those utility extensions, which will ultimately help for future development of those areas in the future. One other thing to point out is this sanitary sewer line that's on the south side of Highway 60. There's far less questions with it. No major issues known with that line at this point. So that was the preferred route. Any questions with the sanitary sewer?
Yeah, Derek, I got a question for you. Is where is actually going to be the starting point on this new line? Would that be right there at County Road 12 where the yellow line is?
It will actually be, let me refer back, for the sanitary sewer you're asking about?
Yeah, well, we're just...
So it'll be located at this future intersection, basically right in the middle of the 4 lots. That would be subdivided.
Okay, so going up the road then...
Yep, so you see where my cursor is? That's where the last manhole is.
Okay.
For the sanitary.
So that's where it'll start,
Yeah.
from there.
Well, in other words, that's where it'll end.
Yeah.
Because it's coming down from the north, and so we'll just bring it down far enough to where we can get services out to the last lots, and then front onto Highway 12. So that'll be the dead end manhole, right about where Derek's cursor is.
So that will run up to the north,
Yeah.
where my cursor is,
Yeah.
and then it will flow in this direction up to the north, Highway 60.
So then bring your cursor down to about, right about there is where it's going to...
Yeah, it's somewhere, it's about in there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So the future development ones could easily tie into that north road.
Yeah,
And well, we probably extend it down that east road when next phase.
oh, yeah, future phases of development?
Yeah.
So one of the things
Of the
that...
grayed out properties.
Yeah, so basically, one of the things that we'll do with this project, Joe had mentioned this is a dead-end manhole. There will be a stub, basically a couple of sticks of sanitary sewer that will be extended out beyond the roadway, so that later, when this road is developed in here, you can just continue to install that sanitary sewer. So yeah, any of these properties to the north of the EDA's property, their cost to bring sewer to their property will be by far less than what it would be if they were to develop right now before we're doing anything out there.
But there'll be no physical connection of the sanitary sewer to County Road 12. There's not
So, no disturb whatsoever.
No,
Okay.
not the sanitary sewer.
Okay.
Will those property owners be assessed then for that, or?
No, that's not proposed right now. Second part of this discussion is the water main. Fairly similar route to the sanitary sewer to the north, but just to provide a little bit of background on this. When we did our utility analysis to see what we would need to do for water main on this site, one of the first things that we had looked at was the option to simply extend water main from County Road 12, where it currently exists, and dead end it within the new development. And what we quickly found during that analysis is that was not going to be a feasible option. One of the things that you have to look at, especially in industrial areas, is the available fire flow that will be available from that main. So that fire flow not only serves the hydrants that fire trucks can connect up to, but it could also potentially serve fire suppression systems or sprinkler systems for commercial or industrial buildings. So it's important that that available fire flow is high enough to serve those types of systems. So again, that dead end extension straight off of County Road 12 didn't look like it was going to be enough. So beyond putting up a brand new elevated storage tank or water tower on the site, one of the other things that you can do to increase the available fire flow is known as water main looping. So instead of just having one connection on the south side of the proposed development, there will be two connections, with that second connection being to the existing water main on the south side of Trunk Highway 60, basically the exact same location where we're connecting up to the sanitary sewer. So between those two lines, we were able to get the available fire flow for this site up to a generally acceptable range that some buildings or developers can begin to work with. Just like the sanitary sewer, if we're extending water main up to the north of the site, these property owners that may be looking to develop at some point in the future could benefit from those extensions by reducing their utility costs when they decide to develop their properties. That looping connection does also provide benefits to the entire east side of town that's currently developed, mainly this area in here. Currently, there's very low available flows in this area, so if we provide this looping connection, that should help with that area. Any other questions associated with water?
Yeah, I got another one on it. How many, from the looping end of it, how many valves are you actually gonna put in there? Will there just be the two, the tie-in, but there will be certain, have you figured that out as to where?
Yeah, generally, I can't remember the exact number of them, but generally what we try to do is space hydrants at no more than 500 feet. So generally, at each hydrant, there's also going to be a main line valve.
So they'll all be set in? Okay.
The hydrants will be set in the field?
Yeah, we will have to extend them like outside of the field. And later, if there's a road that gets constructed through there, say 30 years from now, there may be some relocations of those hydrants necessary during that time, but at least they're out there here right now. We can do our best to get them outside of the field, the area that's actually farmed here right now. So that's a discussion that I've had with those property owners as we figure out how to get those easements up to the north there. We've started those conversations. I don't foresee any issues with acquiring those easements. Okay, so last item I wanted to share a little bit more detail on was drainage. So Joe had mentioned we had received comments during the Planning Commission public hearing. Most of those comments, or maybe all of them, were related to drainage associated with this project and in the area around County Road 12. So just to give you an idea of what is going on right now, existing drainage conditions, I prepared this slide just to kind of illustrate what's going on. So this whole area that is in orange right here and going all the way down to the southwest corner of the site is intended to illustrate the area that's currently draining from the EDA property to the north ditch of County Road 12. So all that water is leaving the site, draining into the north side of County Road 12. From there, it does one of two things. First of which, there's an existing culvert that crosses County Road 12 right here. It's a 24-inch culvert. In terms of the ability for that culvert to pass or convey all of the water that is directed to it during most, what you call a typical design rainfall event, this culvert appears to be pretty well undersized. So during those moderate to larger rain events, what happens is that culvert backs up and water is allowed to continue cascading down the north ditch of County Road 12. Along County Road 12 here, this entire section is a rural drainage system, meaning that all this water that gets directed to the right-of-way is conveyed through roadside ditches or driveway culverts. In a lot of cases, those culverts, whether it's a driveway culvert or the culvert that's crossing the highway, are undersized, as I had mentioned before, for a typical design rain event. I just wanted to point that out, that when we first took a look at this area, bringing up our drainage models that we eventually used for designing the new storm sewer system, this is the first thing that we noticed, is that there is an issue with drainage along County Road 12, especially along the north ditch of County Road 12. So really, what I wanted to get into with today's discussion and what we're doing with this project is, what are we doing to address that? There are some things that we can do to address some of those drainage concerns. If that water is coming from the EDA property, there are other things that we cannot do as part of this project, simply because it's some type of drainage improvement that is outside of the scope of what we're currently looking at with this proposed development. So this next slide, what I have included is an illustration of where this water will be coming from once we develop the new site. So if you remember back from that previous slide, all this water that's leaving the existing EDA property is basically sheet flowing across this property. Some of it is directed to the north ditch of County Road 12 right away. Some of it sheet flows across this residential property here, but it all eventually gets into the north ditch of County Road 12 and is either allowed to pass through this 24-inch culvert right here or be directed further west along that north ditch. So a couple of things that we're doing with this project to address this. First of which is, I mentioned earlier that we're planning on constructing a stormwater retention pond. So the construction of this stormwater retention pond, first thing that I'll point out is that we're required to do this by state law. So this Minnesota Construction Stormwater General Permit is that document that governs how you handle stormwater on any development. This isn't only the city's development, this is any private development that you'd be looking at. Everyone follows the same rules. So basically what that permit says is anytime that we're creating more than an acre of new impervious surface, we need to provide treatment for that water leaving the site. And basically what this permit is getting at is anytime we're creating new impervious surface, so that be roadways, buildings, gravel lots, we're changing the characteristics of that surface, and once it's constructed, it will allow runoff that hits the site to leave the site quicker than what it had been allowed to before, which is that ag field. So this stormwater pond is designed to address address that issues. And it provides treatment of the stormwater that's leaving the site, and it also controls the discharge rate of any of the water that's leaving the site. So if there is, as an example, 50 cubic feet per second leaving the site during a particular rain event in the existing conditions, this stormwater pond needs to be designed so we cannot discharge more than 50 cubic feet per second after everything's constructed. So,
Yeah. The basic rule if you're developing this property is we have to treat it for quality and quantity, right? Quality for any kind of contaminants or, you know, things that might get picked up as water flows across a parking lot or something like that, the sands and oils and things. And then quantity, right? How much water is leaving the site, how fast it's leaving the site. And the general rule is, the rules are set up so that, the requirement is that after the development's in place, the conditions have to be better than they were before the development went in, right? So you have to make the conditions better through the course of the development. You can't just develop the property and, you know, direct all the water onto the neighboring downstream properties and it's theirs to deal with. It's, you know, you have to deal with the water on your site and improve the conditions so that the conditions after you're done with the development are better than they were before you did the development. That's the basic rule.
So to kind of describe how this thing works, or how this stormwater pond works, probably the easiest way to describe it is the side of the pipe coming into this pond, I believe, is about 48 inches in diameter. The pipe that's leaving the pond is 30 inches in diameter. So big pipe in, little pipe leaving. So that pipe that's leaving the pond is less, or has less capacity than what is ultimately allowed to discharge just locally from this site individually here. So just to kind of illustrate or to show an example of how these peak discharge rates from this stormwater pond will be reduced after everything is constructed. I've got this table included up on the screen right now. So we've got a 2-year, 10-year, 25-year, and 100-year rain event. This 2-year rain event is just under a 3-inch rain over 24 hours. Typical design storm event that we would use in modeling and designing these systems. You look at the previous history of these rain events, that rain event has a 50% chance of happening on any given year. So it happens relatively frequently. During that event, at this location right here, that's catching all of the water that's directed through this pond, you'll see a 47%, nearly half, reduction in the amount of water that's leaving the site in comparison to the existing conditions. So basically half of the water is leaving the site in terms of the discharge rate in comparison to the existing. As we get up into the 10, 25, and 100 year, that amount changes to 18 to 12 to 14% reduction in the peak discharge rates from the site. So point number one that I wanted to make with this is the stormwater pond is designed to reduce the amount of water, to reduce the peak discharge coming from the site during these various rain events. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is that stormwater pond isn't the only thing that we're doing to improve the drainage characteristics, especially along the north side of County Road 12. So one of the other things that we're doing, this location right in here, if you look up on the screen, this is where that stormwater pond is. It's a little bit difficult to see, I apologize, but this is the stormwater pipe that's leaving the site. Leaves the pond, comes out into County Road 12, and is directed down County Road 12 for about 200 feet, if I'm remembering right. This location here is the location of that existing 24-inch culvert that crosses the highway that's undersized. So basically what we're doing with this site is any of the water that discharges from the pond, that will not be discharged to the north ditch of County Road 12. It will be directed through this new storm sewer which will be upsized, and allow all that drainage to drain to the south through an existing permanent drainage easement on the south side of County Road 12. So just as an example, during those same rainfall events, I've got some tables provided up on the slide here right now. Looking at those same rainfall events, the 2, 10, 25, and 100-year event, what you could expect in terms of peak flow rates during these various rain events as a result of this storm sewer system is a significant reduction to the amount of water that's directed along the north side of County Road 12. So right now during the 2-year event, I know this is probably a little bit difficult to visualize, but there's 12.5 cubic feet per second that you could expect to run down the north edge of County Road 12 that is not allowed to pass through that 24-inch. After we install the storm sewer system, that 12.4 drops to 0. During the 10-year rain event, or just over a 4-inch rain event, that flow in the existing condition is at 33 cubic feet per second. That number also drops to 0. All the water is directed to the south during the 10-year event. As we get up into the 25 and 100-year event, it gets a little bit more challenging to design your storm sewer for those large, very large rain events. But there is still a significant reduction in the amount of water that's directed along the north edge of County Road 12. So basically what you're looking at for the 25 and 100-year events is around a 75% reduction in the amount of water, the peak discharge rate that's being directed to the north edge of County Road 12.
Can you use your cursor just to show on the map those 4 different areas, the southern discharge, the drainage ditch north, the northwest drainage, and northeast, just on, or if you have to go to a different map?
Sure.
Just so I can visualize.
Sure. So do you know what you're familiar with where you're looking at?
Yes.
Right here? So this 24-inch southern discharge, that's that 24-inch culvert.
Got it?
It's an existing culvert that's there today.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
It's an existing culvert. This drainage ditch north of County Road 12, that's the water that's not flowing through this culvert and is directed
Got it.
Along this guy.
Yep.
These 2 areas are not related to County Road 12 at all. This is the amount of water that's leaving the north end of the site.
Yep. All right. One's going this way, one's going that way
Flip back
on
to
the
the-
north end.
It goes up like a shot.
Yeah.
Flip back a slide. Yep, one more slide. So you can see, show where the ridge line is. There's an existing ridge line that runs across the property.
Yep.
Starts in the southeast corner, and it follows up kind of towards the center. No, the ridge line.
Oh, right here. Yeah,
Right,
okay.
there's a ridge line that runs across the property, right there.
Okay.
And so that northeast part of the property drains to the northeast now, and will continue to do so. And that northwest corner of the property drains north right now, and will continue to do so.
And there's portions of that will
Yeah.
be picked up with the new pond.
Yep.
As well. So
Very good. Thank you.
For about 2/3 of this site right now, that biggest area, you see that's kind of that yellowish area, all existing right now, sheet flows to the southwest corner of the property.
Yep.
So that's the main area that we're addressing.
Any other questions associated with that? My 2 points that I wanted to make with this is one, that pond is designed to do what it needs to do, and that's reduce the amount of water, or reduce those peak flow rates that are coming from the site, and also provide the treatment that Joe mentioned. Point number 2 is with this storm sewer system, we're redirecting a lot of this water that's currently running down the north side of County Road 12 to the south. So what I would expect after this project is constructed would be significant drainage improvements to the north side of County Road 12. I'm going to mention this, we'll probably get some comments once we're done here, but there's a number of comments during the Planning Commission regarding concerns along that north side there. There are some things that we can do with this project to address those concerns, and there are some things that we cannot. Some of the things that we've heard through this area and would probably be worth pointing out is, any of this water that's directed along the north side of County Road 12 here, it doesn't only include the water that's coming from the EDA property. It includes these existing areas that are developed There are a number, as I understand, there's a number of field piles that may still be snaked through here from back when this area was farmed, that are creating drainage issues. But ultimately, in order to address all of the drainage concerns within County Road 12, it would take some type of drainage improvement project. That would be.
Would it be fair to say, like, the only way you're gonna really capture almost all the water there is if you did full curb and gutter that whole length?
That's the ultimate answer probably someday through theirs.
I'm not proposing
curb and
that,
gutter.
I'm just saying
Yeah, that would be best case scenario is if you could do that rural section and change it to an urban section with curb and gutter and a storm sewer system that directs all the water over to the west.
The problem is you got a hill up here and the development's down here. You got, and water flows downhill.
The problem is that there's only so much that we can do with this proposed development project. You know,
I mean, to look at it another way, you know, as I mentioned, the basic rule for the stormwater management is you've got to make the conditions better than they are now with your development. You know, if it wasn't the city developing this property, if a private developer had bought this 31 acres and presented a development plan to you, right, you would make them go through the requirements. We have to meet all the requirements of the city code just like a private developer would. But if a private development company had come in, bought this land, and submitted it, you know, plans for development, you would go through all the boxes and check it off and say, yes, you've done everything within your development that you need to do. But you couldn't say to that developer, you also need to go outside your property down County Road 12 and correct the drainage issues down there as part of your development work, right? They're separate issues. You know, the city has the ability with the county to work on that, you know, hopefully over time and make additional improvements outside the scope of this project, but I think that's what Derek's getting at. With the scope of developing this 31 acres, the scope of this project is to improve the development and the drainage characteristics within the project. It has a finite scope, basically because of the boundary of the property you're developing.
Just thinking outside of the project a little bit, where the drainage pipe, the proposed drainage pipe coming from the pond,
Yep.
where that would cross over and go into the easement there. Yep, you can go back.
Right in here.
Either one. Yep. Is it feasible to, you know, just talking outside the project, is it feasible, instead of crossing there, to just extend down and hook up to the current storm sewer, which is down at the...
So extending the storm sewer with this project would require...
Not with this project.
Or, okay, at a different time.
I'm just asking, is it feasible at...
Down the road.
Basically, what it would require is about 1,300 feet of new storm sewer.
Okay.
And the surface replacement over top of that. So, is it possible? Yeah. Yeah, it's possible to do it sometime.
So put it in the numbers for me. What's 1,300 feet and putting the surface?
Yeah, I mean,
Just a bulk.
it's for sure going to be over $500,000. You're probably looking at more like a $1 to $1.5 million project in today's dollars.
All right. Yep.
Well, and we'd have to go down and make sure the downstream system has capacity to receive it, to accept that.
Yeah, and
But
that's
right
an
now-
estimate, that's an estimate to bring storm sewer all the way to Pearl Creek, is what that is.
Correct, because the existing culvert that there's now, the southern discharge point of that culvert, once it gets out of that culvert, it flows overland, right? And it flows down to the creek through the drainage easement that's there. So, you know, you've got to make sure that, I mean, that overland channel has a large capacity to it and can direct it right to the creek, which, you know, essentially has very large capacity. So if we were to try to contain all that and pipe it down to the intersection of County Road 12 and 2nd Street, you'd have to make sure that you'd have to extend it far enough until you get until you found a pipe that had enough capacity. And you may wind up, you know, chasing that storm sewer all the way down to the creek.
It doesn't, sorry, I can jump in here quick.
No, I mean,
This spring when the snow melted, if you recall it, the water jumped the road because the current storm sewer pipe down at the water couldn't take it all.
Yeah.
And the water cut the road all the way down to Homer's place.
right, so that's, I suspect, I mean, it wouldn't just be getting it down to where the intersection, you'd be chasing it farther than that
Yeah.
to get the capacity that you need to handle that amount of
Sure.
water.
Another thing I think that gets missed too is, I mean, the 100-year storm numbers that 7.2 inches of rain, and people have been asking about this. That's a bad day for anybody in town, not just the houses along 12, but any one of us that live in town, that's a bad day, no matter where you're at.
When you say bad day, literally almost every single street in town will be flooded. I mean, that's a very significant rain event.
Yeah, the storm sewers aren't designed for that, they're not built for that, because it'd be so massive to build that size storm sewers that you'd spend so much money, for an event that occurs on average once every 50 or 100 years. Generally, you design a storm sewer to handle a smaller size storms, like a 10-year event, a 10% probability event. And then you define overland routes that if the larger storms come and that storm sewer gets overwhelmed, the water can flow overland, just like jumping over the road, where it won't cause any threat to property or to personal injury, but it can just emergency overflows, we call them. You identify an emergency overflow route for that water to follow when the storm sewer system is overwhelmed. Now, ponds, on the other hand, need to be designed to handle a 100-year event. They're required that you've got to build that bathtub big enough so that when the 100-year storm comes down and that pipe that's feeding the pond is bringing all that water from the 100-year event, that pond has the ability to bounce in elevation and raise in elevation enough to store all that water and then release it at that controlled rate that the outlet provides. And that's what the pond on this property would do. It would control the 100-year event. So essentially, to put an overview, the stormwater management system that's been designed for the property, will handle all the water coming to it from the new system, new storm sewer system with the new roads and lots. Would hold it in a pond that will hold the 100-year system and would discharge it at a decreased or a controlled rate, essentially the same point where it ultimately discharges now at the south end of that culvert on the south side of County Road 12.
On that pond itself, how will that be done for maintenance-wise? City will take care of that.
Yeah,
That's
city
the
will own
city
and-
part of it, but how do you determine, does it have to be surveyed every so often so that it can carry that capacity? What's kind of an idea that?
That's a good point, is that the reason we specifically set this up with one large stormwater pond in the southwest corner so that the city can own and operate and maintain that pond. It's under city control so that the city can ensure that it's always got capacity and is operating the way it should. If we let each individual lot put their own private storm sewer system on, then you're in a constant fight of, was it designed right, was it built right, is it going to be maintained? So that's why we went with one large pond, so the city has control over that.
But how?
Now, we will have a access road for Wayne to be able to drive down a gravel road and access any part of the pond that he needs to. Usually what you do is you watch where the pipes come in, you can see if there's sediment that starts to build up, like a delta of sediment that builds up. Over time, you can go out and survey that and see how much capacity you're losing in the pond, and you can come out and dredge that out and reestablish that capacity and dispose of that sediment. There's a whole program that's been developed over the last number of years for the disposal, the handling and disposal of sediment from ponds. But usually that's, you'll start to see the visual evidence that sand and silt is starting to build up at the mouth of your discharge pipes.
And the biggest thing probably is just mowing, keeping trees and grass out of that area to make sure that there's excessive debris that's getting into those.
What would be the depth on it?
So this will be a wet sedimentation basin, so there will be a permanent pool in there. The maximum depth of that, when it's constructed, is 5 feet.
5 feet.
There's already 5 ponds in town, so this is nothing new to town either.
And typically what you do is you put the inlet and outlet structures on your maintenance schedule and you inspect them, once a year. You go out and make sure that they're not clogged up and make sure that, everything's in good shape. You just put them on your routine inspection schedule for, fall and spring inspections. So it's a very manageable system.
Does it make any sense to make the pond any deeper? Or is it?
Well, adding more depth to, I suppose you're probably talking about adding
Like
more
you could
volume for
hold
more
more,
bounce
yeah.
for holding, say, a 200-year event. Do take into consideration with this that 100-year event even for storms larger than that, like say say next spring we have a